Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first 1,000 Days Florida kickoff call. I am Madeline Thakur. I'm President and CEO of the Children's Movement of Florida, and it is a real pleasure to welcome you here today. Before we jump in, just a quick piece of housekeeping. We want to make good use of the chat today, and we hope that you do too. Our intention is to move forward into this next chapter of First 1,000 Days Florida with energy, with ideas, with connections, and we love seeing all of that in the chat. We would just ask you please not to use this space to solicit. So to get us started, if we could ask everyone to introduce yourselves in the chat, tell us who you are, where you're tuning in from, and anything you want us to know. And I'll jump into just a quick note about what we're looking to accomplish today, and we'll get going. So for the next hour, we want to spend time celebrating really a decade plus of collaboration for children's earliest years. We, as the title implies, want to share our vision and direction for the next chapter of this work. We also want to solicit some live feedback on the call. So you'll see that Mentimeter logo in the top right that some of you may recognize. So get your phones ready to participate with us. And then the conversation, of course, does not end today. So we will spend time sharing new opportunities and how you can all stay engaged in the work. So many of you already know the children's movement. You know we are all about everything children need in their first 5 years to thrive. That has always been high quality, stimulating, nurturing early learning opportunities, access to healthcare and a medical home, and then support for parents. And if you've heard me or any of my colleagues present in the last several years, you've seen some version of this slide with uh, an image of a young child's brain and noting that in those first 3 years of life, the brain is 85% of its adult size. And so, what does this mean, this first 1,000 Days Florida? Many of you know this is an initiative that has existed, again, for a decade plus as a collaborative effort, bringing folks together across different fields. And what this means for us announcing the next chapter at the movement is just that we have this new way to show that those first 3 years are really critical and too often forgotten, even when you think about those first 5 years. So those of you who've been with us for a while know many of these logos. So our business engagement initiative, Bosses for Babies, our grassroots work through All In for Early Learning, our impact network, our summit, our reading pals that helps mentors have meaningful opportunities to support young readers. And so we're really thrilled that First 1,000 Days Florida joins this work today. And so getting started to hear from you, if you could start that muscle and join our mentee, scan the QR code. We'll go deeper in our next question, but we hope you've got a phone out and can scan this. And we're curious to see, I think we might need to do something so we start seeing your perspectives. Great. So we've got early education in the house. We've got some advocates. We've got maternal health, family services. This is really, as you watch the screen move, this is what the first 1,000 days has always been about, is folks coming together across different fields who are touching those lives of our youngest babies, of our expecting families, and making an impact in the early years. So no surprise, early education is strongly in the house, advocates as well, family services, and this is something that tells us where we need to grow as we're looking to get more perspective into the initiative. But if we move to the next slide, this conversation today is about setting the stage for moving forward, but we also wanted to take time to honor what's already been built. And many of you, I'm seeing your names and locations pop up in the chat. You've been involved in this work, some of you for 5, almost 10 years. And you know that there has been energy around research, partnership, community collaborations, aligning around the priorities for the first 1,000 days. And so many of you know Dr. Mimi Graham at FSU's Center for Prevention and Early Intervention Policy. And we've invited Mimi here today to share some reflections as we move forward for what has been done so far in this first 1,000 Days Florida initiative. Mimi, you are an evangelist for how critical those first 3 years are. And when I think about introducing you, I think of when I have seen you live on stage, and in 10 minutes you can go through 200 slides because you so quickly in showing exactly what needs to be shown on screen. And so we'll do the another one of these speed rounds to hear more about the first 1,000 days. And I just wanted to start with what was the first 1,000 Days Florida, when it launched, and what inspired the beginning of this collaborative effort.
Thank you so much, Madeline. Dr. Neil Boris, who many of you know and love, and I were at the World Infant Mental Health Meeting in Edinburgh in 2014, and the presenters were talking about eliminating child poverty and child maltreatment. And Neil and I looked at each other and said, we need to up our game in the United States. So we came back and we're so inspired. And I connected with Carol Brady, who many of you know and love too, and Dinah Ragbeer, who was at the trust at that time, and said, we've got to create something. So we created this big tent and welcomed everybody. And it was really the first time that we had cross-sectional, involvement in what we all were so passionate about, these pivotal first 1,000 days. And so folks came together from maternal health and the Hospital Association and early learning and early intervention and home visiting. And we were all really passionate about this. And then in 2015, the Florida Children's Cabinet endorsed the first 1,000 days, and Wansley Walters was the chair at that point, and they had a proclamation, and they said there isn't a single issue in Florida that wouldn't be enhanced by a focus on the first 1,000 days. So we
That's
were all
powerful.
inspired.
That is pretty powerful. I mean, I think of our friend and colleague Mark Wilson, who's the CEO of the Florida Chamber, and he always says, if you want to fix 1,000 other things, you start with the early years. And what you're saying is that the Children's Cabinet, 11 years ago said that for our state too. And I think you've hit on a couple of things that are really critical for anyone who has not been part of this over the years. You talk about collaboration, you talk about building something together, and then you talked about sort of across silos that you mentioned, maternal health, mental health, home visiting, academics, researchers, and the fact that you're coming together to collaborate across silos means you get to something bigger. So, what are some of your favorite moments from this collaborative journey so far?
Well, there's so many, but first of all, hosting the big conferences, and so many of you that are on today were a part of those conferences. And so the first one was in 2015 with about 700 people, and then in 2018 it grew to over 1,000 people, and we were sending people away. It was just incredible to see such a diverse group from frontline home visitors, and Carol Brady wanted to make sure that everybody could. It was affordable and everybody could attend, to having hospital CEOs. And we even had Supreme Court Justice there, all in one room, everybody talking about the importance of the first 1,000 days and showcasing what they were doing in each of their communities, which was so inspiring for everybody. And then we tried to keep up the momentum during COVID with a virtual summit, and we had about 500 participants for that. And then we just collaborated in January with the Florida Perinatal Mental Health Conference with a sold out crowd and research posters, and it was just fantastic. And the second real moment was really the ripple effect and the momentum that was sparked by those conferences. Everybody was inspired to come home and do something. And in Sarasota, the local leaders actually did. They launched their own First Thousand Days initiative. And now, a decade later, they've achieved such remarkable outcomes: better mom baby health care, stronger families, as well as cost savings for the health care. And in January, we honored Chelsea Arnold as the first recipient of the First Thousand Days Carol Brady Trailblazer Award for really actualizing what we have all talked about. And we're so inspired by their work. And then the third major highlight was then presenting at the World Infant Mental Health meeting in Rome. And I presented with colleagues from the UK and South Africa, realizing that our shared vision for supporting these crucial early years really extends across the globe. And to be validated that the things that we were doing were the state of the art all over the world, and to have that network of global, passionate colleagues was just so heartwarming.
How beautiful. Well, I think we have a few photos from over the years. We don't have those massive crowds at the conferences, but some folks here remember that. Of course, you and Carol Brady there with Mirni Ritchie in the center, your colleague and collaborator in this at FSU. And then you mentioned the award to Dr. Chelsea Arnold in the bottom right. And there are so many things I want to go deeper on from what you just shared. But one of them is really thinking about the honor that Chelsea received for the first 1,000 days Suncoast effort. And, this is, as you said, huge with measurable outcomes. Started at Sarasota Memorial Hospital. How do we do better to wrap our arms around families so that they don't leave that hospital with their baby and feel alone? They are connected to resources, and it's so deep, but it's a hospital embedded initiative. And, what do you see? You described something coming out of the conferences that people want to go home and do something. People hear about what's happening in Suncoast, they want to go and do something too. What would you say about that?
I would say we want to see it everywhere. In fact, we talked with Mary Mayhew, who is the CEO of the Hospital Association, and she's very excited also about bringing the hospital CEOs together and have Chelsea present to them on, what a difference it can make, in their community. And in our own backyard, we have just talked with our FSU new health system about making the first 1,000 days a key part of the new FSU health system. FSU is in the process of acquiring Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. And so we're just in the fetal stages of this. But Miriam and I met last week with the vice president of FSU to talk about what this could bring. And she's very excited. And so we really want everybody to try to replicate, and they've given us a roadmap of how to do it. So we just are real excited.
How beautiful. And then you mentioned your first highlight was these conferences. And I've heard you say before that this was a way to bring, like, if you don't have the budget to go to 0 to 3 or one of these major national conferences on these issues, there was a conference for you in Florida. You mentioned Carol Brady wanted this to be affordable, but what happened there? Who were some of the great keynote speakers that you brought that you'd want folks to remember?
Well, we had a cutout of George Clooney. I remember that. Everybody remembers that part was fun. But one of the most impressive was Supreme Court Justice Barbara Perriente, who really heard the brain research, and it just it inspired her. And the baby courts, our Florida early
Mm,
childhood courts, really came under out of her commitment and realization of how important and what the courts could do to really change the trajectory by investing in those early years. I mean, we had so many presentations. I would leave somebody out. I mean, it was multidisciplinary, and I think everybody came away with something. We also had poster sessions and happy hours, and there was really something for everybody.
yeah, that's great. And then transitioning this initiative, I mean, you talked about starting it with Carol Brady and Neil Boris and Diana Ragbeer, and it has for the last several years been housed at FSU. And transitioning to a new home was a big decision. What are you excited about there?
Well, what excites me the most is the fresh energy and leadership that you bring and that the children's movement brings. We have so much respect for David Lawrence, who started the movement and really built this incredible network of advocates. And it just seems very natural to go full circle and come back to the children's movement. And your enthusiasm, the extensive network, the influence with policymakers strengthens all of our efforts. And we really believe that you can really amplify the message and broaden the reach and fiercely advocate for these childhood issues that we all hold so dear. And we understand that the new leadership for the legislature cares about early childhood, knows what infant mental health is. And we are just so excited that your leadership might help us see some priorities that we have not, and investments in these early years that we are so eager to see. So
Yes.
it's our moment to make a lasting difference, and we're just thrilled for you to be the new mama and help this baby grow.
Thank you so much, Mimi. It is a real honor for us at the movement. And when I think about what can be done inside of an organization like ours, we continue that legacy of collaboration, of drawing all the best insights from the field, really the experts on the ground working with parents who know what needs to change for families, and then taking it into an entity that can go out and educate the legislature, that can participate as advocates more directly than some other organizations. And so we really want to lean into that. Like you're saying, there is change on the community level, as you've seen in Sarasota, where a group of folks decided to act and then broaden that effort across a region. There's energy in Tallahassee, and all those things need to continue. And those spark moments come from the connections that you're describing. But then we also need to look at the policy and investments from Tallahassee, and we're excited to be able to lean into that for these issues. So thank you so much for spending some time with us to just pause and celebrate what has happened over these years of collaboration. And thank you for all this that you brought to life.
Thank you so much.
All right, Mimi will stay with us as we continue our program. And it's really special to look back before we look forward again. And just at its core, what you heard Mimi talk about is that First Thousand Days is this collaborative effort where we are coming together across sectors. We've had over 600 people involved in regular updates and exchanging ideas, and even more than that when you think about who's attended the conferences. And what we're looking forward to, including all of these different groups and all of you, is really creating a deeper set of policy priorities across those prenatal to three areas. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see we have a brand new website for the First Thousand Days. We hope you'll check that out. And what you'll see there is a set of policy priorities that these hundreds of colleagues and participants over the years have put together. And that includes everything from maternal and child health to infant and toddler care, really that focus on those high quality, stimulating, nurturing opportunities, early intervention, and prevention and resilience. And all of these are priorities and things that we want for families across Florida. But our next task is really to break this down and say what is the concrete thing that needs to change so that when there are delays for children in how they hear, see, walk, or talk, they have what they need. What are the investments we need to make to ensure that every mother has that prenatal care? And really drilling down. And so to do that with you, I want to hand it over to a couple of colleagues and introduce you to Daniela Borroto, who is our Director of Policy, and Deborah Daiti, our Associate of Maternal and Child Health, who will dig a little bit deeper into these priorities with you.
Thank, thank you, Madeline. And it is such a pleasure to be here with you all today, along with my colleague, Deborah. And so I hope that you have your phones handy. We are coming up on our second Menti activity, and we really want to hear from you about the policy priorities that Madeline shared. What still resonates with you? What feels most aligned? And what's still missing? And those policy priorities that Madeline had shared were maternal health, infant and toddler care, early intervention, and prevention and resilience. And so I hope that we can take a couple moments here to just reflect on those priorities and think about what you are seeing in your community. And we hope that we continue honoring the priorities that were set 10 years ago by Dr. Mimi Graham and her colleagues, as well as exploring what can reflect the current needs of our Florida babies and families. So I see a few coming up on our screen. A few are still resonating, which is important. Maternal and lactation care, thank you. Standing up for different communities as well. And so if you can take just a couple more moments and we'll continue with our program. Gaps in state support for early Head Start and Head Start programs, opioid exposure, affordable and quality early childhood learning, accessing food for healthy pregnancies and kiddos. That is one of the gaps we have also seen internally. And so the Menti will stay open, and I hope that you all will continue to answer this question. We will also send a survey post call to continue hearing feedback. And really our goal is that prenatal to 3 is clearly named, prioritized, and advanced within the broader first 5 years work. And your expertise across the sector is pivotal to this work and to this movement. So I'll hand it over to my colleague, Deborah, who will talk a little further about what's on your screen right now.
Yes, like Daniela mentioned before, we'll be having these roundtables, or sort of like the virtual roundtables that will be focusing on the 4 priority policy areas, which is going to be early intervention on August 12th, maternal and child health on September 2nd, infant and toddler care September 16th, and prevention and resilience September 22nd. This will all be happening on a Wednesday at noon. So if you have any questions when it comes to the policy chat or anything maternal and child health or first 1,000 days related, Daniela and I will be the contact for that. So yeah.
Thank you, Deborah. And here on this screen, you'll see a QR code where you can start registering for those policy chats. And we're really excited to co-host these roundtables and with our partners at FLACY, the AELC, Healthy Start, Help Me Grow, the Florida Head Start Association, and FAME. And so you may follow the QR code on the screen, and the registration link will also be in the chat. So our ultimate goal is that these conversations will help inform a set of concrete policy proposals for the first 1,000 days ahead of the 2027 legislative session. And beyond these policy chats, we hope to continue being a resource to you all, and we want to keep the conversation and the momentum going. And so we will include an office hour link in the chat where you can schedule time with me and with Deborah to just share what you're experiencing, what you're observing in your community, or just to have a quick conversation around the first 1,000 days. So we look forward to hearing from you all again soon and staying engaged. And I will hand it back off to Madeline. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniela and Deborah. And for you all to know, you have their contact information here. But Daniela and Deborah are both in roles that did not exist at the movement a year ago. And as we think about digging deeper into these policy areas um, and really drawing out the expertise from the field, these are two faces that we hope you get to know very well, that you see around the state, that you meet online, and that you know we're here to support you. There is so much expertise on this call, and we know that some of you are holding those keys to exactly the change that we need in Tallahassee to make a difference for the families that we all serve. And we're all joined here knowing the importance of those first 1,000 days of life, of those first 3 years of life. And of course, none of it happens without that prenatal period. So as we look to shape different outcomes for families in our state, we need you to participate. So there is that same QR code again, if you want to join one of these policy chats, and that will really be a space for you to share what you are seeing in the field. You're welcome to bring your complaints if that's what you have. You're welcome to bring solutions if that's what's on your mind. But we know that coming together in small groups and having deeper conversations brings something new. And so we're excited to dig into each of those 4 priorities with at least one of these policy chats. You'll also see here a link to register for the future call. This is something we've been doing at the movement for over 2 years now. We gather every other Tuesday at noon and highlight a bright spot in Florida, someone who's doing it right. You've seen Chelsea Arnold, who we've mentioned a couple of times on that call. You see early learning centers that are getting it right, communities that are making different investments. And so even before something is policy or funded, it is a practice in a local community. And that's what the Future Call is about, is highlighting that progress. And then you can also sign up if you're not yet getting our updates. But ultimately, as we think about this opportunity for the movement to step in, we are a policy and advocacy organization, and all of the priorities that we've come together around today are ripe for action, for partnerships, for statewide engagement. And there is so much that we can do together. And as the new home for First 1,000 Days Florida, we are excited to carry the work forward with all of you. Now, as we close here, we're happy to take any questions if you have it in the chat, but just wanted to end with what you're feeling excited about now. We saw from you some concrete suggestions on the last mentee, and we know that there is work to do. And we hope that you are also excited about this moment moving forward. So we'll see if there's any energy. If you've been on our future call, you know that we often end this way with what's one word of how you're feeling today. And we wanted to have this kickoff to ensure that we are feeling connected, that we are feeling that sense of progress or coordinated progress, as someone has put on the screen, and just wanted you to be personally invited into what's next. So thank you very much for spending this last half hour with us, and we look forward to staying connected and seeing you all soon. Hopeful, onward. Thank you for being here, everybody.